Hello and welcome to Why Design. I'm your host Chris White, and today I'm joined by Josh Valman, CEO of RPDK, a company dedicated to making hardware development faster, more cost-effective and scalable. Josh has spent his career at the intersection of product innovation, supply chain strategy and manufacturing, helping companies bring physical products to life from consumer tech to medical devices and aerospace. Josh's journey into this space started early. By the time he was 19, he was already leading RPD International, building a global product development and supply chain business. Over more than a decade, he worked with startups and multinational brands alike, defining the process of taking products from idea to mass production. And in 2023, RPD transitioned into RPDK, now part of Kinara International, where Josh continues to lead efforts in engineering, certification and manufacturing at scale. Beyond running RPDK, Josh is an investment committee member at the British Design Fund, where he helps hardware startups secure funding and navigate the challenges of manufacturing. He also advises the Royal Academy of Engineering, focusing on driving innovation across the industry. In this episode, we're going to dive deep into how the world of hardware development and supply chains is shifting, from OEM customization to the realities of modern manufacturing, the biggest challenges hardware startups face when bringing a product to market, and what investors are really looking for, and Josh's personal journey of building, scaling, and selling a company, and the lessons he's learned along the way. Plus, we'll also get into his latest venture, a TV project that pulls back the curtain on how products actually get made. So if you're interested in the realities of scaling a hardware company, the challenges of supply chain complexity, or what it takes to turn an idea into a physical product, then this episode will be right up your street. Josh, welcome to the podcast.
Hey Chris, thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. I'm just going to do my best to do like a whistle-stop tour of your career to date. Please do feel free to jump in and correct me if I get any of this wrong. But Josh, you launched RPDK International back in 2010. And you've scaled it into a global product development and supply chain business. 11, 12 years or so since then, you help companies take products from concept to mass production across industries like consumer goods, medical devices, aerospace, and IoT. And then in 2023, you sold the business to Kinara International and transitioned the company into RPDK, continuing your mission of making hardware development faster, cost-effective, and scalable. Beyond that, you're also an investment committee member at the British Design Fund, helping early-stage hardware startups secure funding and scale their businesses. You advise the Royal Academy of Engineering on innovation, and you're a keynote speaker sharing insights on engineering, supply chains, and the future of product development at industry events, TED Talks, and beyond. So today we're going to dive into your experience in scaling and selling a business, what that transition looked like and what you've learned, the changing landscape of product development and manufacturing, how white labeling, OEM customization, and supply chain evolution are shaping the industry, what startups need to secure investment and bringing products to market, insights from your role at the British Design Fund, and I'm also excited to hear about your new TV project, giving people a behind-the-scenes look at how products go from idea to factory production. So got a lot to get into, and I'm really excited to dive into this. So why don't we start at the beginning, Josh? Where did it all begin? Why design?
Do you remember Robot Wars?
I do, yeah.
Well, I was 10 when that was on TV, so that was like the most exciting thing on the planet when you're 10 years old, was to see people building robots and trying to kill each other on TV. That was good fun. So I turned up and decided, right, I want to play, and spent several years going to these events. And you expect it to be kids doing this kind of stuff, but it wasn't. It was all, well-educated, well-funded teams of proper adults, and I was 10. But I played around with that for a long time and just learned how to design things, learned how to use CAD, learned how the maths works behind it. It's much easier to learn something when you've got a very specific problem to research a solution to. Trying to learn engineering as an open book thing is nigh on impossible. But when you've got very specific, how do I work out how you hold pressure in a vessel? How do you do hoop stress calculations? It doesn't matter how old you are, you can very specifically research and work these things out. So I learned a lot of that. I just over the years made some crazier things. And I'd go to factories in the UK and I'd buy some, bit of aluminium on eBay, and I'd bring some drawings and some paper round money, and they'd love me out of the room. Ended up in China quite quickly, just because it was accessible. Nobody said no. Everybody was really happy to make whatever you wanted to make, and I could afford it. The pricing was reasonable. So just got carried away, really. I had access to 5-axis CNC and all sorts of 3D printing technologies very early on, so could make lots of stuff, and that got out of hand. I ended up helping all sorts of businesses with designing various products and looking at their supply chain, helping them work out what factories to work with and stuff. That got pretty big. I was still at school, just consulting on bigger and bigger projects.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, trying to trying to manage being at school and also working most of the evenings on various time zones to help people make stuff. But it was all out of pure intrigue and a bit of ignorance. You know, a lot of these systems are tens of years old and no one's ever questioned them, and you come in with absolute no idea what's going on. And you find some opportunities. So I did that for a few years, and then people started to realise that I was not a 40-year-old professional with many years of experience. I was a kid, and these were stupid questions, and they were valuable, but they were stupid questions. Maybe there was a reason for that. They quickly found out I was still at school. I'd never told anyone I wasn't. It's just no one had ever asked. Your supply chain consultant isn't usually.
How old were you at that point?
16, 17.
Yeah. So you're hiding, not necessarily hiding, but you were behind a screen, so they'd not
That's
met
right.
you. Yeah.
Supply chain consulting is rarely in the room.
Yeah.
Well, this is pre-Zoom, right? So there's
Yeah.
very few video calls. Everyone calls on a conference line.
Yeah.
In the UK, I might be in America, and the suppliers in China. So everyone just gets on, just working, profiting. So it was all very good. But there comes a point where probably those liabilities are a bit too large for a kid.
Yeah.
But very quickly lost those contracts as everyone realised. RPD is a sort of way to fix the bits that were missing. I was working with a lot of big companies. Those big companies are very good at ideas and working out what they want or what's interesting or acquiring those ideas one way or another. And they're pretty good at supply chain once it's massive. So once you're making the same thing over and over again in very large volumes, I'm not going to say it's easy. It's definitely not easy, but it's something that's predictable and large businesses are good at managing. But the bit in the middle where you design something new, you certify it, you go through all the regulatory testing and applications and things, and then particularly where you build a supply chain to make the first 500, 1,000, 10,000. Most big companies just can't do that. It's such a departure from what day-to-day running of a manufacturing line is like. They just struggle. So the idea originally was, can you build somewhere where you can knock on the door and say, I want to make this, and have no idea how that might work, and you just bring your mad ideas, and we'd go through all that process. We'd do all the engineering, all the design work, all the certification, set up a supply chain and start shipping goods. And if it goes really well, then we'll help you reintegrate it into your business. If it doesn't, you just turn it off. There's no teams to let go or anything else to restructure. You can just use it as an experiment. And so that's what we built. And we started working with big corporates, with Bosch and Vodafone and GSK and Unilever and all sorts of large companies. And then we decided the reason they were doing that was because smaller companies were nipping at their heels. Smaller companies were starting to find hardware more accessible. So we opened it up and said, okay, well, if you're a small business, we'll offer you the same scale that these large businesses are using. And we started taking on startups and building all sorts of crazy things. And we make medical devices, consumer electronics, industrial stuff. It's a mad place. You come in this office.
Yeah.
Over here, you've got, the next can for a drink that's ultra sustainable. And then over here, you've got a machine that's doing blood diagnostics. And then over here, you've got a machine that's pumping beer out of the tap in a bar. Yes, it's pretty diverse, but that's kind of the fun.
Yeah, absolutely. So how old were you when you started RPD then?
I would have been 17, 18, I think, when we officially
17.
registered it as a thing.
So were you? Did you go to university and you would run it at the same time, or did you just go straight into?
I scraped through some A levels by not quite going to school and then turning up to the exams.
Wow.
And just jumped straight into it. It probably didn't feel like the best decision at the time, but I was enjoying myself. I was doing interesting things. I had some clients. It was sustainable. And we grew from there, really. I've never been to university, haven't done any of that. I've done a bit of lecturing, but I'm not quite sure why they let me in the building.
Well, you've been out there, you've figured out, you've asked the kind of, in air quotes, stupid questions, which actually is the only difference there is that, at university and college, the questions are answered for you as part of the lecture program, whereas, well, some of them are at least, but you're going out there and uncovering it, so it's probably absorbing it a little bit more.
There's different ways to do it, right? I like to learn by doing, so I build a lot of stuff, always have done. In the starting this company, I build race cars now and engines and things like that, and I like to get my hands dirty and do this stuff.
Yeah.
So I learn, whereas certainly you get a leg up if you go to university and learn all that quickly in one place. But I quite like the experience of doing it, getting it wrong, seeing what happens and adjusting.
So you've worked with some very well-known brands there and huge businesses. How was that starting off then as a young guy, no kind of qualifications? You've been kind of found out from a kind of the curtain's been unveiled, and you're this kind of young kid with an idea, a dream, and kind of a lot of moxie. Talk us through those early days of kind of, I guess, business development, getting your first kind of clients on. How did that kind of come about, and then how did you then turn that into a sustainable business?
Yeah, it was small steps in the early days, right? Because I'd gone from running quite big contracts that I guess I'd lucked into, really. I'd been introduced, and things got bigger and bigger. And then I'd all fallen apart. So I got quite used to big things, and I had to sort of step back and go back to selling £500, £1,000, £5,000,
Yeah.
and build things back up. But it was all just, I don't like the word hustle, but it was just getting on with it. It was knocking on as many doors as I could. It was a lot of demonstration. In this industry, you can't talk about most of the things you do, or at least you can't admit that you were the one that did it. Most people like to own the innovation they come up with. So it was a lot of going, well, what are you going to do about that? And they go, oh, we think we might do this. And then turning up next week and going, I've done it. Do you want me to carry on? Quite a lot of, I think you probably call it spec work nowadays, but just trying to prove a point. Very hard to go in with a portfolio and sort of go, I could reapply my skills from this portfolio to you, particularly with large businesses if you're a startup, but to go in and go, right, what's the problem? And then go away and come back and go, right, fixed it. Can I carry on? People start to go, well, actually, you know what? I'll give that a punt. I'll see what happens here. And you open the door and you grow from there. I did think at the time, well, this would be so much easier if I was older. I've got a bit of grey hair. And it doesn't get any easier. That's still how you've got to do things. The numbers are bigger. You still got to get in, prove a point, scale up from a smaller scale deal. It's not much different. And it turns out it probably wasn't the age that was the issue. It's just generally trying to sell into somebody that's got in-house expertise and try and provide some more value above that.
Yeah, and in the world of consulting as well, there's a lot of variety in the kind of the base there, the market. And then lots of people have had different experiences, some good, some bad. And if you're the new kid on the block, so to speak, you're kind of up against preconceptions of what good or bad or whatever looks like. I'm very, very much aware of that in my line of work as well. But and you always want to be pushing yourself in front of new people as well, because you certainly don't want to be complacent that the referrals will keep coming through.
It's not in my nature, and not in the nature of most people who run these kind of businesses. We're engineers. We want to get on with it in the shed and be left alone. And that's the hardest bit about it, is sort of stepping out of your comfort zone to go and have conversations and put yourself into places where people don't really want to talk to you, and then sort of pushed to have those conversations, because actually I'd much rather go and sit quietly in the shed and make something, but you won't have any customers if you keep doing that forever.
Absolutely. So to talk us through the first few years in terms of some of the highlights and some of the kind of key challenges, looking back, that I don't know, were fundamental to whether there were successes or failures, but they had an impact on where the business went.
Yeah. Sense of scale is a tricky one to get via experience. There are many occasions where I should have thought a bit harder before I did something. I think there's a memorable project where somebody came to us and said, "Oh, we're doing a marketing project. We want to make these cows." I can't remember why it was cows, but they wanted to make little model cows that would go on the countertop of thousands of different stores, and they'd be made from layers of foam. And I sort of went, well, that sounds easy enough. Here's a price for it. We'll do that. And I remember just sitting in this enormous. We were in not a WeWork, but something like that. Like we had, and I'd managed to wangle an office for a week before somebody was going to move into it. Yeah, like £2 or £3 a unit sounded like good amounts of money at the time, but when you step back and realise what you've got yourself into, it's just enormous. And in the early days, there were quite a few things like that where you sort of go, oh, that sounds like a good amount of money, and then you do the work and realise just how far off you were, and that drove all the work we've done since in terms of budgeting and actually trying to work out what things cost and putting prediction models in place for what something's going to take. But you had none of that at the start. You just sort of went, that's a number that sounds about right and covers my costs for this month and a bit of next. And I'll sell it for that, and then you just deal with it. And you can be taught all of these things and you can read all about them left, right, and centre, but until you've done it, you don't get a real sense of scale for what things cost and take or anything else. So the first few years was a lot of working that out and realising that when you start to work as part of a team, it's not all the same, and not everybody works at the same paces and does things in the same way, and trying to create some communication, I guess, between approaches and build some SOPs and things like that long before I knew what an SOP was. Yeah, it was a challenge, but that's driven to where we are today, where everything is very process driven and you're in a position where you can predict what something's going to take, what it's going to cost. And whilst manufacturing is the most unpredictable and difficult market in the world to get into if you want a solid plan, it allows you to predict and mitigate problems and also to handle them when they come up, because they are inevitable.
Absolutely. And going back to the eternal pricing problem, I suppose, it's something that comes up quite a lot, especially on the consulting side. How much is your time worth? How much is the project worth? And when you start scaling it with how much is that person's time worth? And what does this look like? And manufacturing materials. I think a lot of people I speak to go through those struggles of, there's always at least one project where you think, definitely didn't charge enough for this.
Yeah. But also the other way around, where you get better and better at doing something, and you can do it quicker and quicker, but you're billing by the hour. So the better you are at it, the less money you make.
Yeah.
And trying to rationalize that internally, but also with clients as well. Is, you know, the reason I can do this twice as quick as somebody else is because we're twice as good at it, or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And trying to get your head around that and how you do scale pricing for things you're better at and therefore quicker at versus things that you're just working through in their execution of work and you bill by the hour.
Yeah.
These are things you all learn very quickly when you start an agency or a consultancy in this sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I've heard quite a few stories over the years from kind of freelancers and small design consultancies where they lost work or come very close to losing work because they didn't pitch high enough, and they lost credibility because they thought the price was fair and it was like a good price for what they were doing, kind of compared to what some of their competitors were charging or what the company had budgeted for. The misalignment there kind of just seeded a distrust.
Yeah. But then you also get clients that don't necessarily have the comparison, or you have to work quite hard to show the comparison between, you know, here's a one-man band who might be absolutely fantastic, but it's not the same service you get from somebody that's putting 20 people on a project to device, you know. And a lot of, I mean, particularly nowadays, a lot of our sale is educational. It's not, you need something doing, we're going to do it for you. It's, okay, well, what are you trying to do? Okay, well, let's try and sort of coach you through how we do that. And if you don't buy from it, it doesn't matter. Hopefully we've provided some value. Because there is so much option nowadays. There are so many agencies of all scales that can do this sort of stuff. Back when we started, I don't think there were many places you could go and do end-to-end engineering and manufacturing. There were a few really big ones, but there weren't many at our scale. So we had a bit of an advantage, whereas nowadays there's a lot more. Several of them spawned off of people that worked here, and you know, we all each other, but we're also bidding for the same work.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I was having this conversation last week, actually. There's a lot of small consultancies that say they can do a lot more than they actually have capacity for. So from the outside, they look a lot bigger, you know, and actually when it comes to it, if you take on that full end-to-end project, you know, it starts to creak. Whereas, you know, if you do have a well kind of suit team, you generally do have expertise across it, then that makes you stand out massively, doesn't it?
So, I mean, you know, at the time we were foolish to think you could do end-to-end with 3 or 4 people that were there after the first year, because it's not. End-to-end is effectively running 3, maybe 4 businesses all under the same roof. It's only once we scaled to quite a bit larger team that we had true capacity to do it. At the beginning, you're sort of working it out, and it's only once we're big enough to actually have those proper departments and people who understand how to do each bit and can resource each bit as its own thing, did it start to fall into place. So it is a very difficult thing to offer.
Yeah, absolutely. So how many people are you now then within the business?
I don't know what we are. It's 100, 120 across the group.
Yeah. So that's some quite impressive scale then, and I guess, did that jump up after the sale then, and you became RPDK?
Yeah, obviously, because Kinara already have some of their team. We had our team. Obviously, there's some efficiencies and things that happen there.
Yeah.
But yeah, as a combined team, we're here in London. They've got an office in Guangzhou. We've got an office in Shenzhen. They've got an office in the Middle East and in Germany. Yes, yeah. So there's quite a bit more coverage than we used to have.
Yeah. Well, I imagine you had a fairly sizable team before this. Was it still RPD? And, you know, and then obviously it just jumped up there. But what was some of the kind of the biggest challenges, kind of, like say, going from kind of, I guess, initially yourself to a team of 3 or 4 to then in the tens? What was, obviously we mentioned SOPs.
I maintain that the hardest thing about any business really is building the right team and working with the right team, keeping everybody on the right track. I think your initial shock is going from something you're doing in your bedroom to something that matters to other people. That's quite a big culture shock to you. Then it's getting into a world of trying to not just get the right people to work for you, but make sure they're motivated to do that work, which is an ever-evolving challenge. I'm sure I've made many a mistake as well as success through this process, because you're trying to get really, quite often very experienced, but also very talented people who are excited about what they do, and try and get them all to run in the same direction. It's really hard. So as we scaled, and we did multiple times, we scaled up and then had to scale back down again, made the wrong decisions, made the wrong calls, and had to sort of curtail things. There was a point where we'd hired so many people with so many specialists that as the work finished, you'd realise you had a specialist who could do this, and you go, well, when are we going to get another project like that again? And at the time, you sort of refactor your way of thinking about things, and you know, now we use a lot of contractors because you need specialist resource, but you're not going to need somebody that can do that forever. So you can sort of call on people that can then spread their talent across multiple businesses and things like that. So yeah, it's definitely the most challenging thing. Can I tell you what I've learned? I don't know. I don't know whether I could distill it into something that simple. It is definitely trial and error, and you have to get the right people in place to do the managing as well. You know, eventually identified that was not me, and brought in some people around me that knew how to build teams and motivate teams and make sure people are in the right track and that people had career progression and other things. Because when you first start, everyone just being excited about being able to make stuff is great, but as you grow bigger, that's not enough to hold a team together.
Yeah, absolutely. There's only so many people that you or an individual can realistically manage day to day and kind of give the amount of time and care that they need while still being able to do the stuff you want to do.
So give them the space to have other people to go to. I think as you
Yeah.
grow, if you're trying to manage everybody yourself, you end up in a position where no one's got anyone else they can go to. So
Yeah.
they go to each other, which then gets quite messy because actually you could have solved that, but they didn't want to talk to you about that, which is fair. So
Yeah.
there's no one else, there's no, it can't really be a complete pyramid. It doesn't work like that. So you need people around the business that enable people to have conversations in different aspects so that you can resolve things in the right way.
Absolutely. Yeah, massively. So talk us through the transition then. Probably talked on other podcasts kind of in detail about the actual sale and how that came about. But what were the main kind of changes, from RPD to RPDK and kind of that changed in how you operate and how you day to day really worked within the business, Josh?
I thought it would be catastrophic, but I thought it would be a big change to everything. And actually, the thing that took me the longest to get my head around was putting a K on the end of the name. Trying to remember to write that down every time. I've only just about got there. We're almost 18 months, almost 2 years out, actually. We spent a long time trying to decide where we wanted to live. We'd get regular approaches and we'd entertain them, and we got pretty close on a few occasions, and it was just never quite right. I think we were right to think, look, we've got to live with these people. This is not a sell the business and off we go into the sunset. If we are going to join somebody, we want to carry on living there and building a business around that team. And it's got to be the right people, it's got to be the right environment. And so we did in the end close a load of things where we got to points where both sides were going, yeah, I'm not sure we're going to live very well together. And then we met the guys at Kinara, and like, actually, this is very similar. You have the same approach to business, you have the same sort of ethos on how you do things. Of course, there's some differences, but those differences actually have benefited each other. We've sort of supported them on various things. They've supported us on various things that we didn't have or didn't think about or appreciate. It's been really interesting that it wasn't quite what I expected at all. I think you get geared up by a lot of people to say, look, when you sell this business, they're going to break it. It's all going to be over. But we haven't felt that at all, actually. It's been really a supportive environment to carry on building the business. We share a lot of resources between each other. And I think that was all down to how cautious we were in the process of finding the right people.
But you're still, well, you're the CEO, aren't you, of the group? So it's you've got that kind of that thread all the way through from the different stages of the business. So how long did it take from kind of initial conversation then through to kind of actually putting the K on the end?
And we started talking to them in March, April, until we've done early July. Really was when everything formally completed.
Within the same year?
Yes.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Quite quick.
Yeah.
Yeah. We'd had year-long conversations with other people and got nowhere.
Yeah.
But I think once everybody made the decision that it was something to do, we got on with it. And actually, the most time was spent, with lawyers. It wasn't actually the conversation between each other. It was all quite neat in the end.
Yeah. Do you think that's because it was more of a like say more of a merger and a transition than a traditional kind of sell and absorb type arrangement?
I think there was less ambiguity about what was going to happen to us because they wanted to have us continue, independently. So that was simpler to work out what the integration plan was. It was to join the group, benefit from each other, but carry on growing the business within the group. Which does make things simpler. If you're trying to integrate teams and work out where you're going to live within different departments, then that does get messier.
I'm interrupting this episode to share some exciting things happening around why design. At the core of this podcast are the incredible design journeys my guests have been on and where they're heading. And these journeys stem from the relationships they build, the communities they're part of, and the amazing achievements that come from collaboration. So beyond the podcast, we're hosting regular online huddles and quarterly meetups in the UK, with plans underway for an annual gathering in the US. We're also running hands-on workshops both in person at Makerspaces and online to connect and inspire people in physical product development. So if you'd like to join us or stay in the loop about upcoming events, sign up at teamkodu.com/events or click the link in the show notes. Now, back to the episode.
Yeah, absolutely. Wonderful. So let's move on then. Let's evolve, sorry for that, but into the evolution of product development and manufacturing. So something we talked about when we were preparing for this call, but how have you seen kind of hardware development and manufacturing change over the past decade or so from your vantage point, I suppose?
In a lot of ways, everything. In a lot of ways, nothing. When I started, manufacturing was reasonably inaccessible, right? If you didn't have lots of money, you couldn't just go and develop a product. Over the last 15 years, you've seen that become much more accessible. You can turn up at various factories and go, right, here's some drawings, and they will help you work out how to get that into production. But with that, I think you've then seen the advent of a lot of suppliers who are helping, but are maybe not sending you in the right direction because the machines they've got in the building or the capabilities they've got are what they have, and they'll try and push you in the right directions for that. So I think whilst things are more accessible, there's still a need for guidance and people to work with you. We've certainly gone from most projects coming in and being full custom development from day one, doesn't matter what it is, you have to put a huge amount of work into developing a product, to going, actually nowadays, quite a few of the things that we used to make from scratch and have to, because there was nothing out there, are available OEM. And there's a lot more customization and adapting existing products to new application. I don't hate that. I don't think that's a problem. I think if the technology exists and you can do something different with it, why would you design it again from scratch? So I find that quite exciting. It makes, again, delivering new products more accessible. But I do worry at what point we meet some sort of saturation of the same stuff coming up again with different logos and different casings on it.
Yeah, I was out at CES at the start of the year,
You said the same
and
6 times on 6 stands, yeah.
well, yeah, I was out with a good friend of mine, and he's worked on the OEM side. And when we grabbed a beer later on, he was he says, "Look at these photos," and he showed me like a bunch of photos of what looked like the same vacuum cleaner, but they were actually different brands, but they were all developed in the same factory,
Yeah.
OEM white labels, but the ID was bang on identical. It was just the logo on the badge was different in each time. And we met at one of the mixers as well, that I think Spanner had put on, which was a fantastic event. We met this young entrepreneur who had, his business was portable projectors, like 4K battery powered projectors. Talking to him, asking him about his product development, he said, just the guys in China just designed it for me. They drop ship it, it's kind of, we made $1 million in profit last year just by just specifying what we wanted
from scratch, banging their head because they wish they'd done something like that. But that will reach a point of saturation, and it doesn't.
Yeah.
What scares me is it makes it look like hardware is a lot easier than it is because the factory takes all the risk and all the fear, and they've made it 300 times before, so it doesn't matter. They know what the issues are going to be. Whereas when you design something new, there's just so many pitfalls and so many issues, and that's why you need the experience and the team behind you to do it.
Yeah, I mean, in that case, it's kind of fair play to him. He's jumped on opportunity, but that's a marketing project, really. The way that they've made the money is through clever marketing and through his
hardware companies are, or at least need to be. It's all very well saying we're in a hardware company and I want to build a team of 100 engineers and I'm going to be an expert in the technology, but you can only develop it so far before you've got bloody sell it to keep these people employed. So I think people lose sight of that a lot with hardware companies, that actually you still need to be able to sell the thing and be a sales team or a marketing team, whatever that is. And as you said, that sort of drop shipping OEM customization piece has become really interesting. We've got a whole team of people in Guangzhou that do sourcing just of OEM customization products for all these kind of businesses, where you can focus on selling something physical, but it's selling something, not developing it. And over time, and we use it quite a lot as a sort of test base for new products. So we'll get something that's close or kind of gives us some indication of what we're trying to achieve with a new product. And we'll put that in market and see whether you get 1,000, 10,000 sales and see what the feedback is. And when you start getting those feedbacks and say, right, I wish it did this, I wish it did that, I wish it did this, you go, right, brilliant, I've got some real, genuine, practical input that I can then put into my custom development before I go and invest all that money.
Okay, yeah.
Rather than developing something new, launching it, everyone goes, well, it's not what I wanted. And it's too late at that point. Or you do market studies, which I have said many a time I don't agree with. You put someone in a glass box and say, what do you think of this? They say, well, I'd quite like to come back next week for my next 50 quid to tell you the answer. So I love it. It's great.
Yeah.
Okay. Every game because people want to come back to the next research session. They're a bit skewed.
Yeah, people are a lot more forthright with their feedback if they've paid for a product, I think, and they've had you get either end of the extreme. You never get someone who's like, yeah, that was fine. It's either they love it or hate it.
They either really like you or really don't like you, and will feedback in an approach to give you that information.
But that's all valuable, isn't it? Yeah, absolutely. So we've kind of touched on this slightly, but some of the biggest mistakes that you've seen kind of companies make when they're trying to bring a new product to market, would you say it's that kind of just go in on the academic research more than...
There's nothing wrong with academic research at all. It's more making sure there's a customer to buy it. I think it's very easy in the lab to go, right, that technology works, I can solve XYZ problem. And to go into market and realize that nobody knows about that problem because your research was so deep, no one's even realized that's their issue. There's a big element of sales and marketing that's sort of missing when you go engineering first into a project. And I've done it before as well, where I've spent months developing something for us or for me myself, gone, this is amazing, this has solved XYZ. And you put it in the market, people go, I didn't know there was a problem with XYZ. You start solving things that don't exist yet. And then your marketing becomes, how do I tell people they've got an issue so I can solve it? Which is a bit backwards. So I think that people often get caught up there. I think also people sort of assume that once you've designed something and you can 3D print it, you can just throw it into a factory and it's just going to come out and it's going to be fine. But actually, I would say at least 50%, if not more than 50% of the engineering happens on the factory floor, not in the lab or, when you're prototyping. But I think that appreciation is long lost because people don't make, you don't get tool makers very much anymore, certainly not in the UK. You don't
Not
get
in the UK, no.
sit on factory floors and appreciate how much work goes into even just designing the tool that makes the bit of plastic that you've 3D printed. Weeks of work on designing an injection mold tool and huge amounts of experience, and all of that is sort of packaged up as China or factory. So I think neglecting that and thinking at the point where you've got a 3D print that people like, that you can just get it out of the factory again in 3 months' time as 10,000 packaged goods is where people often gets caught up. So the cash flow is only planned up to that point, and actually probably need another, certainly a few months more than that to get something done properly.
Absolutely. And then, often you don't actually start the real testing until it's in customers' hands.
V2 should always be planned after batch 1. It's very rare that you'd sit on it and go, okay, V1's going to be in market for 2 years and then we'll do V2. I rarely see that unless it's something quite simple.
Yeah, most of the startup founders that I speak to, and in fact, when it's a new product for a more established business, it's the first iteration. There's always compromises, but you need to just get something out there to get that feedback to see how people are going to break the product, and then
they will always do it the way you didn't imagine they were going to do it.
Yeah, because the test equipment, the labs are fantastic, but they're limited by your imagination, and there's going to be a lot more creative ways to break something across the minds of 1,000 people.
People do weird things. I mean, a lot of the projects we do with the corporates is more about, yes, it's developing products and doing engineering, but it's working out what people actually do with them, because we're trying to help them get something into market, test it, and see how people interact, and then design something off that, right? Because we're quite often when we're selling to corporates, it's instead of market research. So you're spending the money you would have spent on market research making something and seeing real feedback. So we put a lot of time into developing sensors that would understand what people were doing with products, so that we could see, not ask somebody how they feel about it, but see. You get such weird behavior. We did one with a chocolate company, and chocolate's massive growing market in Southeast Asia, right? And surely that's obvious, but maybe not, because the melting point of chocolate's 35 degrees C milk chocolate. And the temperature in that region is about 35 degrees C. So it's quite hard to actually deliver to a market that wants it.
Yeah.
You end up with cold chains for something that in the UK isn't cold chain.
Yeah.
So we're doing some research to work out how do people interact with chocolate, and we'll work out what products to make. And they sort of get 1,000 sharing bars of chocolate and invite all these people into a room to eat the chocolate. Some's in the fridge, some's at room temperature. And they observe all these people, and 50% of them will take it from the fridge, 50% from the room temperature, and they open it with the tear strip, and they break the blocks off, and they eat it like a normal human being. And they said, right, this is our data, and this doesn't tell us anything. This is rubbish. So we made some stickers that had a couple of accelerometers and a few other things on them. We put them on the chocolate, and we said, right, give us 1,000 bars of chocolate. We'll put a sticker on each one, give them to 1,000 study members, and just say, bring it back in 6 weeks. I just want the wrapper. I don't care what you do with it. So they were aware they're under observation. 6 weeks later, you get these wrappers back and you analyse all the data, and you can see how someone's unwrapped the chocolate. You can see roughly how they've eaten it, the temperature it was at.
Okay.
And we found something like a third of people in this test area would open a sharing bar of chocolate. And this is before, chocolate wasn't fun anymore and it was tiny. So it was like half a kilo. And they'd rip it open. There's no tear strip. They'd rip it open like a dog, and they'd munch on it like a sandwich. No breaking blocks or anything else. And you just wouldn't see that behaviour under observation, because who would want to show you how weird they really are?
Yeah.
But you can go, okay, well, people aren't really using the tearing strip. A third of people aren't using it. We can get rid of that. That saves, X%. And then we can maybe reduce the indentation of the blocks. People aren't using them very much. We can cut the indentation, reduce the whole pack size slightly. Save like $7 million a year on logistics, because it's quite a fragmented market. Lots of flying and shipping and things. Pack sizes came down by 12% or something, and it huge impact. And that was all from actually understanding what people do with the product, not just trying to design something we think they'll like. And in actual fact, the consumer sees pretty much none of that. There's an opportunity to actually understand what people do with products, and that's where there's just not enough focus. We're just making stuff, throwing it out into the world, and hoping that we can buy enough Facebook ads to get it in front of people. Do it the other way, and it's more interesting.
That's fascinating. Yeah, never thought you would have shared a chocolate story like that, but it's a really interesting insight.
You're talking about what people actually do with products. That's the work that we have to do to try and get that engagement. Because I've got a FMCG client, and they spend tens of millions, probably hundreds of millions a year in R&D. But they'll still pay you €50 to have a shower behind a two-way mirror and show them how you use your shampoo. And there's a particular kind of person that wants to go back every week for a two-way mirror shower, and not necessarily representative of the market. So you've got to find other ways to actually understand things. Otherwise, everything you're building products off of is complete conjecture.
Yeah, we perhaps change track, because we're going down a different track for the podcast. We go to shower routines, but no, it's fascinating stuff. So, well, look, let's talk about your work with the British Design Fund then, because it's still kind of obviously very, very much related to innovation. And I know Damon over at British Design Fund. I know a few of your kind of your fellow advisors as well. Tracy Sharp was on the show last year. So, what through your work with the BDF, what do you look for when investing in a startup?
Yeah, it's interesting sitting on the other side of the table, actually, because I've joined a few of our customers in their investor conversations. Obviously, I've had investors, and sitting on the other side of the table is quite interesting. I think I'm looking for a plan. I kind of assume, or at least that somebody else is going to double check this, but if you're in the room and you're wasting your life on this, that there's probably an opportunity here. The question for me is not whether there's an opportunity or whether you can actually solve it. I'd assume you can if you're here. Is the plan realistic? Do you actually understand what the development stages are? What are the stage gates? What is the plan to get into production? Is that realistic? Do you actually understand the extent of what you need? I often get plans put in front of me that are like, 6 months development, 3 months manufacturing. You go, okay, how, where, what are we manufacturing? What processes do we need? Rarely do you get that sort of level of thinking into it. But, if you're going to put money into a hardware business, you need to know where that's going to be invested. And you need to make sure that people know how much they need to spend, because it's probably more than you're budgeting for. So I'm trying to, certainly with the BDF portfolio that I'm working with, it's help them make sure that plan is solid. So what process are we buying? Where are we going to buy them from? What process are we buying for the next thing? How do those two things link together? Are they in the right place for that logistics cost not to be a hidden cost you never realized? Some people end up with compounded logistics in their BOM of like 10% of the cost of the products, which is crazy. We could have sourced factories close to each other, but so-and-so's mate knew this factory and so-and-so was found on Alibaba, and suddenly you haven't realized that China's quite a big place, or you're making something in China, something in Taiwan, something in Europe. So it's a lot about hashing out what the plan is and how that's going to work. There's a little bit about budgeting for the BOM and making sure that estimations of what unit costs are going to be down the line makes sense. You can't forecast them until you've got products in market, but at least there's a sensible justification for what your unit economics is. And if I trust that you care about this enough that you're not going to waste your life on it if you don't think it's a big opportunity. Whilst people will check that, me personally, I'm looking for technical things.
Yeah, like I said, it's the plans. I guess if you're going to give one piece of advice to a founder trying to launch a physical product, I guess it'd be around planning and research.
It's how do I get from here, where I've got usually something, prototype 3D printed, maybe slightly market tested, to manufacturing it and then selling it. And that doesn't mean, my sales plan, my manufacturing plan is go to factory. My sales plan is buy Instagram ads. That you see that a lot. And what it should be is, right, we're going to manufacture this. We're going to buy this process over here, this process over here, or we're going to outsource the program to this, tier one contractor. They're going to do all that bit. And then the sales bit is, well, who are we going to sell it to? How are we going to go and talk to them? How are we going to communicate with them? What is it we're pitching to them? What are our expected conversion rates and things? You can actually go, right, if you weren't here tomorrow and we had this money to deploy in sales, what are we doing? What people do we need? What do they need to actually do? And it's that level of detail you need to get the confidence that you can actually sell this thing. But it's all planning. It really is all planning.
Brilliant. And in terms of some of the challenges or common challenges that kind of startups are facing when they're seeking investment, obviously not having a plan, we'll kind of re-stress that. If they don't know the numbers, that's a fundamental challenge. But what other kind of common challenges are you seeing?
Sometimes the why is missing. So, okay, well, I'm going to do this to solve this. Why? Is that actually a problem? Is that something that you care about? Like, it's a hard slog running a business. Some people get very lucky, right? They dropship something, and after 3 years they sell out to some conglomerate for $10 million. Great. But it's not the majority of us. The majority of us slog away 10, 15 years in a business before it starts to fly. And I think you need to be quite committed to a purpose bigger than just wanting to run a business. I think trying to bring that across when you're pitching is quite important. Certainly everyone that I've invested in, or either through the BDF or myself, have been people that I go, right, if everything went wrong tomorrow, you'd still be doing this. You wouldn't just go, do something else. And that's kind of the confidence you want from your investments. You want to talk to somebody and invest in somebody that gets you excited about a problem you didn't care about until you met them. And that heart is quite often missing from presentations. And I'll tell you one thing that is a telltale sign of that is the monotonous way of reading a memorized presentation. It drives me nuts. If you're pitching, you should be the expert in the room, and you probably are the expert in the room. People memorize these presentations and they're going, and then we will do this, and then and you just cannot listen to it, and you don't get the feeling, you don't get the excitement and the feeling from somebody. I want somebody to come in the room and tell me the thing they know most about, which is their company, but conversationally. And I think people miss out on that quite often, and it can completely kill a really good opportunity without that passion and why embedded into it.
Massively. Are there any resources or places people can go to upskill on that? Because that's storytelling, that's theatre, that's
the presentation bit.
On the because like you say, if they're in it, certainly if they're an engineer and a founder, you know, that bit is probably going to be well out of their comfort zone, you know, in terms of they're usually introverted. Let's kind of play into a stereotype there, and pitching is nerve-wracking stuff. And especially, you know, I was speaking to Claire Trant yesterday, and she said that some of the kind of sessions she had pitching were because the investors were asking the difficult questions, and because it made her think. But you know, that's quite an uncomfortable place to be in if you're not a confident person. So I don't know whether you've got an answer for this, but do you have resources to help?
Separate. So I still don't like it after many years of doing speaking and presenting and God knows what else. You know, if you said this morning, do you want to go and play with an engine, or do you want to go and do a podcast? I'd have said, right, I'll see you later, I'm going down. But you kind of got to separate the showman version of you and the real version of you. And I don't quite know how you do it, but you sort of, after a few goes at making presentations and going to pitch events and things like that, and do those, even if you don't think they're a good opportunity, because they're a good practice. You sort of get to a point where you can observe yourself having a chat, and you go, oh, you made a good point there. And you go, oh, that was terrible. Don't say that again. You have to kind of create that separation. I found when I was learning how to present, which I'm still not very good at, but when I was learning, I was watching lots of TED Talks of people who have the right conversational style, who have good timing, and you just watch them on repeat and repeat and repeat. I don't know if I've ever told Rory this, but Rory Sutherland's got a way of speaking that's really engaging because he knows when to time his pauses. He knows when to ask sort of rhetorical questions. He knows when to sort of engage the audience and when to step back and make a statement. And I just used to watch his talks on repeat until I had that pattern sort of embedded into my head. Him and a few other people, I'm sure I can come up with a list later for you, but just sort of drum into my head until I had that pattern, and I'd sort of go, right, this is my pattern for pitching, this is my pattern for selling, this is my pattern for doing a keynote. You just drill it in, and then you get to the point where you can just watch yourself do it. But I would never rehearse, so I'd never write notes. I'd never write enough information on a slide to read it. Because if you write it down and you work out what it is you want to say, you get it wrong. Instantly get it wrong. Whereas if you go, right, that's the general subject I need to cover on this slide, and then I'll move on, and you put enough slides in there that you're not scared you're going to run out of things to say too quickly, you can talk properly as a human being about the thing you understand, rather than going, God, did I say that? Or did I say that? I can't remember how I wrote it down. I don't remember what word I used. And you just get completely caught up.
Yeah, that's really solid advice. You know, when I'm just in terms of the podcast, you know, when I'm right at the beginning, the cringy bit where I'm doing the "This Is Your Life" kind of recap of stuff.
Yeah.
I've written it down, but I do have that. But I can read that. You know, I'll trip over the odd word, but fairly fluidly. And I don't tend to practice that. But when it comes to recording the intro that I record after, so we actually cover what we actually said rather than what we thought we were going to say. My partner's in the other room, laughing her head off at me because I'm repeating the same line 10 times. Yeah, because I'm trying to look at the camera, trying to not look at the prompts.
It's the same. I'll tell you about this TV thing in a minute, but it's the same on that. You know, Max is the director on that, and we'll do the whole day single take on everything. We'll get to the end of the time. You do like an introduction of where we've been today and what we're doing. 20 takes later, it's getting dark, we still haven't gone home. And it's like, just 4 sentences, please. I can't, because you told me what to say. I can't do it.
Why can't you remember 4 words?
Yeah, it's that bad. So never write anything down. go for it. Just have the subjects and go through it.
Just wing it, yeah. But I hope you don't have to do another take, so you have to remember what you were trying to say. But that's a nice natural segue into the TV project then. So let's talk about that. So rather than me kind of regurgitate, tell us what the TV project's about, how you got involved in that, and yeah, go for it.
Yeah. I mean, they've been asking for years for me to do something on engineering. So my big bugbear is that I grew up with loads of engineering stuff on TV, right? There's Robot Wars, there's Scrap Heap Challenge, there's loads of stuff.
Yeah.
And that got me into this world and made me excited by it and made me want to learn, not just go, oh, that's interesting, but actually go, right, how do I do that? How would I design this? That's really possible. I could do that. And there's less of that nowadays, and I want to be more of it. So they've been asking for years for me to actually go and put my money where my mouth is and go and present one of these things. And there's been lots of ideas over the years of, go and restore a steam train and go and look at this and go and look at that. And they all sound great, but I just haven't had the time. But I'm starting to readjust what's going on. And we found to do this, but I said, look, I want to do something about manufacturing. I want to help people understand how things are actually made, not, like how it's made where you see the Volkswagen factory and it's all robots and everything's $1 billion, and not how other people present it, which is, 1,000 people in a room assembling something and it's all horrifically miserable and dark and gloomy. I want to show people how you actually go from the thing you 3D printed in your bedroom to shipping 10,000 units. And they said, that sounds really boring. And I said, okay, well, give me a chance. So we've shot a pilot. I think we've got a couple of shoot days left, but we're shooting a pilot, which is just at the moment based on UK manufacturing. So I can knock on the door and open up the coffers to get on a plane. But that goes through the process of, this is your prototype and that's very nice. But the next step is, how do you design that for manufacture? How do you optimize it for injection molding? What does the injection molding facility look like? How do the machines work? And then we go to an EMS. We look at, well, how do you make a PCB? And what even is a PCB? And it's sort of been a challenge to judge where to put the level of detail, because you've got some people watching who know all the stuff and are intrigued. And then you've got other people watching who haven't made anything before, don't know what a PCB is. And trying to balance that's been tricky, but it's been really interesting to sort of, again, we'd written a script and worked out what we were trying to do, and then we shot it all and realised that we hadn't followed that at all, but had sort of meandered in a rough direction. So we've still got a big day of sitting down and working out what the edit is. But that's been really interesting. I'm quite excited for that, and hopefully it's valuable to people, and you can watch that as a resource. I'm hoping that they'll let me pull out a bunch of really detailed things of like where I've got carried away and been talking about, draft rates and then how a slider works on a tool, and it's not going to make broadcast edition, but maybe there's some 10-minute excerpts of like, shit, right, I need to do some injection molding, like, a quick study of how do I do this stuff. It should be fun.
So what's the, I appreciate you might not be able to divulge too many details, but the actual kind of product then that you're covering, are you able to say anything about that?
There isn't one. There's not a single product.
Okay.
So we're looking at processes in general, because what I didn't want to do was get hung up on like people going, well, that was a great show, but that was only about how to design a webcam.
Okay.
I'm designing I don't know, washing machine. It's nothing like a webcam. This is irrelevant to me. I wanted to actually explain to people that, most of your products go through this injection molding factory or a version of it. It doesn't matter whether you're making a washing machine or a webcam or a fighter jet, probably have parts made here. The fact is, you don't go to a washing machine factory very often. You'll go to a factory to make this part and this part and this part. And actually, factory isn't one place. It's usually 10, 20, 30 places that make one product. And how does that, why is it called a supply chain? Surely it's just a manufacturing shop that you go to and buy your product from. It's not the case. So I've been purposeful not to make it too specific about certain products, and we cover lots of different products we go through.
Okay.
And I have made some fun things through it to try and explain things. When you sit in front of an injection molding tool and it's massive, and you're trying to go, that's a slider in there, and there's a lifter here, and you're trying to rotate this thing. You can't demonstrate it. So I've made some mini mold tools and had some fun machining some stuff. And, it's fun. It's fun. I'm hoping it's useful, but we'll see.
So when does that? When you're looking for that to air, then?
A question of the year. I don't know. That's about my
okay. Watch this space.
A couple of days left to shoot, so hopefully this year.
Yeah. Well, we'll keep an eye out for that then, and do let me know when it goes live, and I'll share it through the socials as well. But I mean, I grew up around Robot Wars and glad you said Scrap Heap Challenge, because I used to love that. I don't think there's anything like it now, is there? Robot Wars is. I don't know if that's still going, but BattleBots is out in the States.
There's a new series coming out on yesterday. I think the Masters of Invention, and a couple of people from the team here are actually in that show, which
wonderful.
Is, again, about designing and making stuff and doing that. And that's the kind of stuff that, excited me when I was a kid. And you need a bit of that, because otherwise it's all, God knows what do kids do now? Minecraft, I don't know. It's
Minecraft and Fortnite,
Others, is it? Yeah.
Amazing. let's talk about the future of manufacturing and supply chains then. So what trends do you see shaping the next generation of product development? I suppose we should bring AI and automation into this, and what kind of role you think they're going to play in the next 5-10 years?
The AI thing is a little bit dangerous, like the whole generational design thing. Everyone got very excited about that everything was going to be generationally designed and you'd have all this organic geometry, everyone would 3D print everything, and it sort of died a death apart from very specific application. I think similarly AI and design might need a few more years before that's practical, but there is potential to be able to go, right, here's my design, here's my spec of it, and I'm going to change the fuel flow rate, and it's then going to adapt everything about it and start to change the model and go, right, well, if the fuel's increasing, we're going to change this diameter and that diameter. That could be really interesting, but I think it's 5-10 years away. I think the OEM stuff's making it more and more accessible. Hopefully people build on it and don't just recase more and more products, and eventually we just can't move for lawnmowers or whatever it is people are selling. I think China's won for a very long time because of the density of supply chain. And I'm always stuck by that if I can get 300 different processes all within 20 kilometers of each other, by the time there's a problem, if I'm in the UK and I'm out here and something's going on in China, by the morning there's been a problem, they've all met for lunch, they've all solved it, and they're all back at work again, which you don't get when you've got supply chain divided over multiple countries, languages, and other things. But increasingly we're seeing people not rely on an ecosystem to build a supply chain. So they're not relying on somebody else setting up this factory and having 20 people set up factories within the local area. They're going, right, well, let me build it in-house. So we're seeing a lot more European suppliers and UK suppliers as well sort of build more and more capability in-house, so that you get that ecosystem, but all in one building, so they're not reliant on other people. It takes a lot of investment. It takes a lot of time to come together, but I think that's probably the only way we see things start to move away from China. And I don't think there's any need to at the moment. You want the speed and the capability and the expertise that you have in China. But I also think it's interesting to diversify from a sustainability point of view. There's a lot of ships moving around, and certainly larger products we try and bring closer to home because we can just reduce the amount of emissions significantly. So I think you will start to see a trend in that direction. I want to call them mega factories, but certainly mega capabilities within one factory outside of China. Hopefully we see some things that are more like baseline products that AI can build on. So you can launch a product that is the hardware that could do X, Y, Z, and multiple people can offer software. In a similar way to the iPhone has apps on it, they provide a hardware program and people create apps for it. I think we'll see more of that, but in devices we don't think about. So, there's 50 different ways that we can manage our smoke alarm and our home safety. So we install white label alarm system, and somebody develops all sorts of different predictive programs and things that can do things with cameras and all that. I think we'll see a bit more of that. So maybe less custom hardware in that sense. But I don't know. This is a strange market that doesn't have clear trends, and whatever you thought was going to be the next big thing fall apart. I mean, look at that AI pin thing. Everyone thought that was going to be the future. We're going to drop our phone and get a badge that does AI, and within a year, that's disappeared.
Yeah, absolutely.
Trends come and go in hardware, the same as they do in software.
Yeah, there's a lot of hype. I mean, AI is super useful. It's, but I don't think it's going to replace too many jobs in design. It's just going to change the job slightly, and it's a tool at the end of the day, isn't it? So
it makes things more efficient. I can tell you for a fact. I mean, I use it a lot to sort of not necessarily execute calculations, but work out what's the right maths to do this, what's the right way to do that. How do I run this sim in ANSYS without having to spend 2 weeks working out which buttons to press? It's the best thing I do with it is upload user manuals and just go, how do I do this? 200 and it just gives you the answer. Like that sort of stuff just saves so much time, particularly when you're working at data sheets and things like that. There's a huge amount of time to be saved. So in the first instance, it's efficiency for existing engineers, and then we look at how we reduce time to market using AI to actually design and develop things.
Yeah, massively. And I think it's giving people who aren't so tech savvy access to previously untouchable stuff. I mean, for example, a few weeks ago, I was trying to create a landing page so people could download the findings from that the huddle that we ran a few weeks ago on business development, and I spent ages trying to change the size of the button in HTML to go onto the website, and then I thought, why am I struggling with this? I could just chuck this source code into ChatGPT, and lo and behold, kind of 5 minutes later, it was all fixed because I just told it what I wanted it to do. I want to change that button to that color and that roundness, and then a couple of iterations later, and it was ready to go.
Yeah,
bonkers. And I'm fairly tech literate when it comes to stuff like that, but it's been a while since I've coded a website.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'd like to think so too, but it still takes me ages on the right button in SolidWorks for something because you just haven't done it for 6 months. Whereas with that, you can just go, do this, what buttons?
Yeah, absolutely. So that we're rapidly approaching an end of time here, but perhaps you could talk us through kind of what you're excited about kind of for the next kind of 6 months or so with RPDK.
What am I excited about? There's a load of new work starting that's really interesting. Lots of medical device stuff. Without medical devices, that you can very quickly count the impact you've had with something like that. There's quite a few sustainability projects exploring new materials as well, which I like. I like doing that collaboratively with clients where no one knows whether this material is going to work yet, but we're all going to work it out together. Yeah, there's some interesting stuff going on for us in the UK and growing the capabilities in the UK. I'm trying to decide whether I can say anything about that or not. I'm not good for the minute, but maybe we'll come back in a year's time and you ask me about it because it'll be interesting too.
Yeah, absolutely. It sounds very exciting. It's been great having you on the show. I've really enjoyed our conversation and where it's gone. Yeah, very, very excited to see kind of where RPDK goes, but also, looking forward to seeing kind of you on TV as well. And so do share that with us. If people want to reach out, I'll share your contact details in the show notes.
Yeah.
Link to your kind of LinkedIn profile. But yeah, Josh, thank you again for joining me.
Thank you. Thanks, Chris. Thanks for having me. And hopefully I haven't waffled on too far off the script.
It's just the right amount of waffle, I think Josh knows, but it's been brilliant. So, thanks.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Why Design. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to leave a review wherever you're listening. It really helps others discover the podcast. And while you're at it, why not share it with a friend or colleague who'd enjoy it too? If you'd like to stay connected or explore more about the work we're doing at Kodu, feel free to visit teamkodu.com or connect with me, Chris White, on LinkedIn. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you next time.